Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Game one of the NBA Finals was Thursday. What could this series tell us about the Lakers? We'll tell you that next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always going to be free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, watch the show, and most importantly, participate in a gigantic Lakers conversation that is hopping every single day with over 17,000 subscribers to that channel. Lots of people talking to us, talking to each other, leaving comments and questions. Please do leave lots of comments, lots of questions. We will be using them throughout the summertime. Andy and I look every day to find comments or questions that we might be able to use on the show. So please, particularly for the everydayers, it's something that you guys can do to make sure you're part of the show. We really will pull these questions and use them. And if the day goes by, Andy, that maybe we don't use any questions or any comments, it probably means you guys weren't doing your job. So pick it up. Anyway, we're going to get into a few things, including an interesting question I was asked on the radio this week about upside on the Lakers roster and where it might exist. But let's start, Andy, with the NBA Finals. Thursday was game one. Not so much based on who you're rooting for, this, that, and whatever. I personally am pulling for the Nuggets. What do you think this series might actually teach us about where the Lakers stand, in terms of how good they are, how much progress they need to make going in next year? It's always interesting to kind of look at that and try to get a gauge on your own team by watching other teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing truly definitive in the sense that the Lakers were working off a pretty small sample size, and what the roster is going to look like next season, we don't entirely know. So depending on how much change happens, the answer could be we learn not a damn thing. But assuming there is some element of continuity, the way Rob Pelinka talked about that they would be prioritizing, I think if Miami manages to push Denver to 6 or 7 games, which for what it's worth, I think is very improbable. My official prediction, for what it's worth, is Denver in 5.
That's kind of where I am.
Which would be pretty similar to how the Lakers fared. I think depending on how these games ultimately shake out, how competitive they are, you can use that in some ways to be instructive about just where the Lakers stand in the landscape of the best teams in the NBA, because to say the least, it was a dramatic change from where the season began to where it finally ended. And there are a lot of reasons to, I think, be optimistic and look to try to keep this group together. But, small sample size always can make people nervous at times. So if nothing else, I think it gives you something of an instructive measuring stick just to try to figure out, okay, how close are we, or even certain elements of the matchup. Like, for example, if you see Miami, struggle with Nikola Jokic the way the Lakers often struggled with Jokic, and frankly, the entire league.
I was about to say, everyone.
But they have an easier time containing Jamal Murray or preventing Bruce Brown or KCP from going off. That might give you a better idea of, okay, what do we need to make sure to do along the wings to fortify ourselves? Are the guys that we have, are they the type of players that we need? If, say, actually those guys run amok even more than they did against the Lakers, it's like, all right, you know what? You give Austin Reaves and Rui Hachimura and even maybe D'Angelo Russell, Dennis Schroeder, a little more time to play together, the coaches a little more time to scheme things out. Maybe you can contain those players better.
Yeah, two things here I think stick out for me. It's like, you talk about, aspects of containing the Nuggets and looking at Murray, looking at KCP, looking at the different kind of lineup configurations they put out there. It's always one of those questions of how much is Denver going to be one of those teams that the league respects enough? If Denver blows Miami's doors off and they win this game and they win this series in 4-5, a relatively easy 6, whatever it might be, is Denver going to be one of those teams that the league respects enough to say, okay, we need to figure out how to make up the gap and match up against them? There's, different teams do that. When the Warriors did that, for example, like the peak Warriors teams, the rest of the league started to think, how do we match up with that? What can we do to beat that? Because that is the official gold standard of where we are. I don't know if Denver's is going to do that or not. Just if they have quite that reputation. But the other thing that sticks out to me, and this is where I think it becomes really kind of important, is okay, even if you grant the Lakers are a step or two behind Denver, even if you think it's going to be hard for them to make up that gap in one off season, I think talked about this on Thursday. What happens, Jamal Murray, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, but Michael Porter or Nikola Jokic, the front, it's never easy for the front runner. Denver goes into the season next year as the front runner. It's never easy. Somebody gets hurt, turns an ankle at the wrong time. A knee injury keeps you out 6 weeks, and that happens to cover the first couple rounds of the playoffs. When this kind of thing happens all the time. And, just ask Phoenix, who advanced to the finals a couple years ago after Anthony Davis gets hurt. Where do the Lakers stack up relative to the rest of the teams chasing Denver? That's the part that I think is really tricky. And, are they right there with Miami, who beat Boston, and kind of a Phoenix team that has a lot of work to do or whatever? Because at the very least, I think what the Lakers would want to do this summer, and tell me if you disagree, is separate themselves as much as possible from that next group. So you have Denver. Let's say you go into Denver, put Milwaukee back in there next year. Just, things have gone. How much can the Lakers put themselves right at the top of that next tier of teams that you don't have to squint very hard and don't need much of a break to be right there with the best teams? That's what I'm really interested in.
Well, I think it depends to some degree on how much you believe in a core of LeBron, AD, Austin Reaves, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, if he's still here, Dennis Schroeder, if they find a way to retain him. The players who mattered the most for this team in the playoff run. How much do you believe in them with the benefit of a training camp and the coaching staff really being able to implement counters to the counters and the type of plays that they keep in their back pocket until the playoffs, and really have the ability to try to put another team on their toes? But it also, I think, to some degree matters what you really think about these other teams in the West, what they're able to do. Like Memphis, for example, they went through a lot of turmoil over the last few months of the regular season between everything going on with John Morant, the injuries to Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, who the latter could be missing sometime next season.
It took a team that looked like a good bet for the conference finals and had them out in the first round.
Right. And all the stuff going on with Dylan Brooks, who in all likelihood is not going to be on the Grizzlies next year, was them getting upset in the first round more indicative of them having already peaked, or them being brought down by turmoil that won't resurface next season? Golden State, it's been well documented by now that the punch heard around the world with Draymond Green and Jordan Poole, that had a ripple effect for the season. It's not the only thing, because you can see the effects of aging on Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, the younger players that they were hoping they could help them win now, win later. Clearly, that plan really has not played out. So how much of what we saw last year was a lot of outside issues with Golden State versus just this group has gone as far as it possibly can? The 2022 title for Golden State took a lot of people by surprise, certainly took me by surprise. I will say right now, if Phoenix does not put a better support system around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, they're not going to be very
No,
good.
and I think they'll be able to build some of that out, but it's going to be harder. I think the expectation is that they'll just be able to do it, except they don't have a lot of tools.
Right.
And a guy like Torrey Craig is going to be hard to hold on to, like valuable players like that.
That's my point, because you'll recall my immediate reaction when they made the deal for Kevin Durant was, I don't think they're very good. I think they have two really good players. Can even a team like the Pelicans, can they actually stay healthy? Yeah. Because when they've been healthy, they're really, really good. Can Sacramento take another step forward? But the point being, though, none of these teams that we saw, at least over the last couple months of the regular season with the Western Conference, none of them really struck me as better than the Lakers. Yeah. Not significantly better. No.
One of the things that kind of gets to that is this, you talk about how much confidence do you have in the core. I was asked an interesting question this week doing radio in LA about upside on the roster and where it exists, particularly, obviously with talking about the younger players on the roster. And I answer the question in the way that I think most people would, but the answer to the question gets to a lot of the issues that the Lakers have, I think, around how to build a roster and the kinds of supporting players that they currently have. So we'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and you need to make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. Right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, it's secure, it's really easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to the top point scorers, or get a little saucy with an exclusive bet like the 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. And FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Again, this is a safe, secure app. You get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. So make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Okay, so I mentioned the question of upside. We'll get to that in a second. I do want to take this opportunity, Andy. Thursday night, I believe, was the kickoff of the Scripps Howard Spelling Bee Finals. A lot of people talking about spelling has taken the country by storm. This thing has become a really huge deal. I know, Andy, you love spelling. It does not give you anxiety in the slightest. So I thought we could have a little bit of fun with a Lakers spelling bee. These are all players that we have covered. I'm going to give you the name, and I want you to spell the player that I mentioned. First, we'll go with here, Andrew Goudlock, or as our friend Mike Brown used to call him, Goodlock.
He did. He always called him Goodlock. Andrew.
If you misspelled Andrew, I would have been really disappointed.
I'm trying to take the freebies where I can. I believe that's Goudlock.
Yes, then you say Goudlock at the end. Andrew Goudlock. That's exactly right. There was a brief moment where people thought that Andrew Goudlock was going to be a real diamond.
Yeah,
in the rough. It turned out he was just kind of rough. Good for him, though.
He had turtle posture.
He did.
We really liked him. We covered him. He was a good kid.
Good kid, and managed to have a couple moments in the NBA, which is more than most people can say. All right, so I'll drop a couple more names on you over the course of the show if we can. The question I was asked was which player, meaning the young guys, really specifically, has the most upside. Our friend Roger Lodge does AM 830 in Orange County, asked me this question. The answer I gave him was Austin Reaves. And I think really your choices here are Austin Reaves or Rui Hachimura, I suppose. And, to me, I picked Reaves because I think, we saw this jump from him when he went in the starting lineup and, averaging, 17 points and whatever it is with the assists and the 3-point shooting around 40% and getting to the line at really an elite level, versatility as a defender, all this other stuff. And while he is not a baby by NBA standards, he's not old either. And with more playing time, with more confidence, I think could make a little bit more of a leap. But what struck me about it is the answer on the Lakers, there's nobody that you look at as like a star in the making, a young prospect that you would hold on to because you expect him to become one of your, elite all-star franchise type players. There's no young Jason Tatum or Brandon Ingram or Lonzo Ball or these guys that the Lakers had drafted to become stars in the NBA. And so when you look at their the quote unquote young core, they really are built, I think, Andy, to support the older stars. It's not a young group of guys that you're counting on to become your star players of the future. And that struck me as a little different than like kind of if you look at young players and young prospects and and that around the league.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth noting that as the season went along, Austin Reaves started putting up numbers that, if nothing else, are all-star caliber. I'm not saying he'll end up being an all-star because a lot of that, comes down to the fan vote, and it can be complicated.
Mm-hmm.
There are guys who play at all-star levels for years and never end up making the team. But in 15 games in March, he averaged 17 points a game, almost 6 assists, with 38% shooting from the field, 38% shooting from behind the arc, 55 from the field. In April, 5 games, small sample size, but it was a continuation, 61% from the field, 52% from behind the arc, 20 points, 5.5 assists. And we saw the numbers that he was putting up in the playoffs. He joined some pretty elite company in terms of like 5 straight games with 20 points or more. So there is a trajectory with Austin Reaves where maybe he still seems like he is in support of LeBron and AD for a little while just because he has not achieved at the level of LeBron or AD, but he may be producing at a level that feels above that station, just in terms of a very generic.
So would you agree? You would agree that if you had to pick a guy, the young player, assuming everybody, Hachimura's back, all these guys, that Reaves is the answer to that question?
Yeah, because for the time being, Reaves is the best all-around player they have. Like, Rui is very tantalizing in the sense that we saw him play at an extremely high level with the Lakers, and he seemed to have had some things unlocked with him in LA, whether it's because he just needed a new environment, new atmosphere, whether you can give a lot of credit in a hurry to Phil Handy, who is known as the best in the league when it comes to player development, whether you want to give some credit to LeBron being in his ear, and for Rui saying to LeBron, give me information, give me feedback. Like, by all accounts, Rui was really, really asking LeBron, how can I go about being better? What can I do to make your life easier? Rui, though, is, I think, more unique than Austin Reaves, if maybe not as well-rounded. Like, there are not a lot of players at Rui's size with his athleticism who can create their own shot. I actually think that there are fewer, and in basketball, bigger is often better. And Rui is a bigger, stronger guy than Austin.
He is a bigger, stronger guy than Austin Reaves. There's no question about that. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would call him a more maybe, I guess,
I think he is more unique. I didn't say he's better. I said he's more unique. If for no reason, then there's nothing particularly unique about Austin Reaves.
Oh, I disagree. I think that level of versatility, that ability to get to the free throw line, if when you start stacking up the skill set, I think that is not something that is found necessarily. I will say this: the one thing that I think is pretty uncommon about Hachimura that I will say you just don't see that much of is his comfort level as a mid-range shooter. That is something that, and this is, I think, an important aspect of, like, we talk about context a lot with role players and why certain guys, you fit them in certain places with certain roles, make a difference. Like, Hachimura has value to the Lakers because, like you say, he can create his own shot, but it's also the kind of shot that he can go get. And I think, from that aspect of it, I could see what you're talking about. But he's definitely not better. I think that part.
I'm
100%
not trying to make the case that he's better. I'm
sure.
Again, unique doesn't always mean better. It just means unique.
Okay, but I'm not sure of that. Well, then let me ask you this. What's the value then if he's not better, whether it's then Austin Reaves, whether it's other player, sort of stock player X, what is the value in your mind of unique?
That it's just harder to replicate. It can make him a difficult matchup. I think Rui, when he's really going, can be very difficult to guard because of his size and his quickness and the spots where he looks for a shot on the floor, where a lot of times teams are trained not to really look to guard those spots to begin with. Those are the spots that you're often looking to give up. It's one of the reasons why I think the season Phoenix went to the finals in 2021. They were a really counterintuitive team because with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, even Cam Payne, you had a bunch of guys who were just thriving in the mid-range, and teams are not used to actually having to guard that area. So that's just off the top of my head, one.
Yeah, that's right. But like I said, I didn't want to.
I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down.
No, but what you're talking about, but like unique,
Austin's better.
No, but it's not. But that wasn't what I wanted to clarify or understand a little bit better. Is better? It can be better, but like you say, unique might have its own value. And I
think Austin has.
Hold on, to that point. There is something about Rui and what you're talking about in his particular skill set that I'm not sure we've seen enough of it. And we talked earlier this week about, I think there certainly is the potential for him to be a little bit overvalued, but I can point to something that maybe speaks to what you're saying and his long-term value and the specificity on how it might be used. And we'll get to that next. Okay, Andy, in honor of the spelling bee, you got Andrew Goudlock. I'm going to raise the level on you a little bit more. You remember our old friend Svi Mikhailik?
Oh, Jesus.
Can you spell?
You didn't even say
Svi Mikhailik.
I don't even think it's Mikhailik. Isn't it Mikhailik?
Either one.
Well,
spell either name.
I know,
either guy.
SVI.
Yes.
MYKILUYCK. Now
you were off to a strong start. It's Svi. You got the SVI. MYKHAILIUK.
That's a toughie.
Mikhailik.
That's a stinger right there.
It is. Stanislav Medvedenko.
Oh, don't. That's insulting.
People oftentimes put A's in the Medvedenko part. It's all E's, people. That's
it was actually, and he is the goat of all goats, but Chick Hearn could not say Medvedenko to save his life. He would always call him
Medvedenko, I think.
Medvedenko, yes. It was Medvedenko.
It's an easy mistake to make. So people have been like I said, we talked about it, we will continue to talk about it. The relative sort of perception of D'Angelo Russell going into a contract and Rui Hachimura going into a contract. And I've seen a lot of people say that Rui is worth 18 million, 20 million, but it would be insane to pay D'Lo that amount of money. I disagree. I think D'Lo is a better player, but either way, one of the things, if you're looking for that kind of uniqueness or ways in which a certain player has a value in a certain context, the playoffs obviously matters. It's one of the reasons people are so down on Russell. And if you want to look at Hachimura as a guy who maybe has different value in the regular season or something, but for whatever reason, his skill set becomes very useful in the postseason. This postseason was obviously a good one for him. Shot almost 56%, including nearly 50% from three-point range. But his 5 games in Washington, which were not consequential in any other way other than, I guess, conversations like this, he was great in the one series he played with the Wizards. So there is at least the possibility that what Rui does works really well in the postseason and can be leveraged better in the postseason, whereas a guy like D'Angelo Russell becomes more vulnerable based on his skill set, even if Russell might actually be a more valuable regular season player if you want to make that argument.
I mean, look, D'Angelo Russell alluded to this, or frankly, was pretty open about the idea that there are certain things as a player he's never going to do. He's never going to be able to become quick enough to break anybody he wants off the dribble, on an island. That's not how he plays. He's never going to be super athletic. He's never going to be super fast. He even said, he doesn't expect to become equally adept going right as he is going left. And as much as I can tell you from seeing feedback on the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel comment section, it's not the greatest thing to say after a series where, frankly, you crap the bed. I'm not going to get any better. Not much for me to work on.
I don't think it's. I don't think that's necessarily what he meant, but that's what it sounds like.
It is what it sounded like. He probably should have focus grouped the things that he planned to say before actually putting them in front of an audience. It's not the time to present yourself as, both sewed up as a player and, in his words, nice. But there is some truth to the idea that there are things that it doesn't matter how hard D'Angelo Russell works at. There are physical limitations that will get in the way. Yes. And the reason I bring this up is because whatever limitations you have as a player can become more exposed over the course of a series, where the best coaches in the league have the ability to just game plan, scout, and pick apart your weaknesses and look to really pinpoint and focus on those weaknesses. So in the case of Rui, it might be that his skill set becomes either more difficult to take away or more difficult to match up against. So it allows him to thrive, like, even as you said, playing with the Wizards, where frankly nobody ever thrives.
Right. Look, I mean, like, is he going to shoot 50% for his career from 3-point range? Probably not. Certain things, but at the very, what it certainly means is he's a person who is very confident playing in the playoffs. I mean, we've covered a lot of different sports and a lot of different athletes, and to some degree, the ability to be clutch, the ability to be a playoff performer, a fourth quarter guy, whatever it is, it's not so much that like guys get better. I mean, some guys, the moment really locks them in.
Jamal Murray, Jimmy Butler, those are great playoff guys.
Something about the moment, like they become
Fisher, Robert Ory,
more precise. Their attention to detail goes up. But for a lot of people, it's but not getting worse. It's not allowing the gravity of the moment to change how you play, how it impact you in a negative way, to get you a little bit hesitant, to make you tighter, to make it, because, if you can stay the same in game 7 as you are in every other game, that puts you ahead of a lot of dudes. Okay. It may not put you ahead of the guy who uses that thing and somehow channels that to become the best version of themselves. But if you can just stay who you are and not freak out by the gravity of the playoffs, and maybe that's what Rui is. And I don't think Russell freaks out. I don't think, but I'm sure there were some confidence things creeping in, and it's just that his vulnerabilities become easier to target in a series where every single detail is accounted for in ways that it's just not in the regular season.
D'Lo looked like a guy that, as the Denver series went along, was getting inside his own head. I mean, D'Lo is a guy that, whether you like him or not, he plays with a hell of a lot of swagger. And there are people who think that he plays with more swagger than he's earned. But either way, D'Lo is a guy that drips of confidence while he plays. And that confidence was dissipating as the Denver series went along. I want to make sure
leaking confidence.
Yes. One guy, though, that I want to make sure that we mention when it comes to upside and potential with this team, because I think it matters, and he's going to get lost in the conversation of bigger names and bigger salaries. Max Christie. Yeah. Max Christie's potential, which I think is real. And in the first half, where he had more opportunities, whether out of necessity or the coaching staff seeing what they liked or a little bit of both. I think he showed real flashes of a 3-and-D player with very good instincts on both sides of the ball. He's another guy that, he looked raw at times, but he did not look scared of anything. Max Christie, I thought, looked very confident when he was on the floor, which really stood out to me because his summer league was, quite frankly, disastrous.
Oh, it's horrible.
He looked awful. Like, even by the standards of 19 second round one and done, you're watching him in the summer league going like, has this guy actually played basketball? And the amount of improvement that he showed between summer league and through, say, January, which is basically around when he stopped playing, I think it's very important that he takes a step forward this upcoming season. A, because they need depth. B, because 3-and-D wings, with his type of, I think with his type of build and length and all that stuff, they can be difficult to come by. And if they can manage to grow one of their own, he's going to have an opportunity next season. It's just worth mentioning how much he actually matters in this conversation.
Yeah. Well, there's, let's look at the three guys we talked about and we'll quit here. But like Reaves has a chance to, I think, sort of ascend in the sense too that he continue to do what he did as a starter, and then going into the playoffs on a day in day out basis and whatever, and like that turns him into an extremely valuable player. That sort of all-star adjacent level, really really high end, non all-star in ways that can really elevate a team. Hachimura, for example, averaged 13 points, 6 rebounds. In April, shot 54%. Can he do that? He's had months like that throughout his career. In March he averaged 8 points and 3.5 rebounds and shot 47% or 48%, I should say. Can Hachimura be April Hachimura or playoffs Hachimura for 6 out of every 10 games, 8 out of every 10 games over a course of an entire season on a good team that's depending on him? I think that is a level of ascension that will, that people will look at as more significant. But like you say, and we'll quit here, if Christie can go from a guy who you play in an emergency to a guy who is a core member of, ninth guy in your rotation, that's incredibly valuable. Because they may not have access to a lot of guys who can be the 8th, 9th, 10th guys. That's like a trade. That's like honestly making a trade.
I think really I'd be looking more 9th, 8th as opposed to 9th, 10th. I just think it's really important.
Sure, but I'm saying if he can reach that point where every game you play in the regular season, you go 9 or 10 deep most nights. If every game that they play next year, Max Christie is a dependable member of that rotation, it's like they've acquired a player in a trade without having to give anyone up. And so it's a good point that you're making. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with a bunch of Lakers fans and enthusiasts. Again, please leave us questions. Please leave us comments. We will be using them throughout the offseason. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.